Welcome to the Stoic Responder Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Healy. As a special agent who spent more than 15 years conducting large-scale fraud, money laundering, and public corruption investigations, Stoic philosophy provided a mindset edge that became the foundation of my professional success. My mission today is to share those same ancient mindset lessons with you so that you can turn obstacles into opportunities and adversity into advantage. Time to muster up. All right, folks, welcome back to the Stoic Responder Podcast. It's a new week. It is a new month, and we are going to go full speed ahead into August. Folks, before we get started, a couple things I want to talk to you about. Number one, please head on over to the overwatchcollective.com and check out our favorite 501c3. The Overwatch Collective supports law enforcement. They support our community. They support our families by providing funding for therapy sessions and supporting mental health initiatives, again, for our first responders, for their families, for our veterans. Their motto is one more is one less. And I take that to heart because one more individual that we can provide services to is one less statistic. Please check out the overwatchcollective.com. Make a donation if you can. Buy some gear, buy some sweet t-shirts or hats or some of the other gear that they've got there. All of it goes to support a good cause, which is supporting mental health initiatives and providing free anonymous therapy sessions for our first responders, their families, and our veterans. Guys, Greg and his people over there are doing great things for this community. I love to support them, and I hope that you will join me in supporting the Overwatch Collective. Again, check them out at the overwatchcollective.com. They have their annual fundraiser coming up, by the way, in August. It's August 24th in San Mateo, California. You can get a ticket for that on the website, or you can make a donation towards the annual fundraiser. Again, these are people who are supporting our community, and I want to make sure that my listeners are supporting them as well. One of my favorite t-shirts right now is my Overwatch Collective t-shirt. So even if you just are in the mood to buy a cool new t-shirt or cool new sweatshirt, that money's going to go to a good cause in providing therapy services to our first responders, veterans, and their families. So thanks so much, guys, for indulging me as I talk about my favorite 501c3, the Overwatch Collective. One other thing I want to talk to you about, kind of the theme of this podcast, the theme of what I do, is really can be wrapped up in one word, and that word is resilience. Now, resilience, of course, is the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or challenges or changes, right? And as first responders, as law enforcement officers, we need to have resilience. The problem is the population at large does not have resilience. And many people in our own community do not have resilience. In fact, the Ohio State University did a survey recently, and they found that only 55% of Americans surveyed believe that they actually have a fair amount of resilience, that they're actually able to handle situations and bounce back from them, handle change, overcome, deal with stressors in a resilient manner. And so, what I'm trying to do here with this podcast, what we're trying to build up, is give people tools to become more resilient. Give our first responders or anyone who's listening tools to become more resilient. I'm talking about kind of the four domains of resilience. I'm talking about physical, I'm talking about emotional, I'm talking about mental, and I'm talking about social. We need to be more resilient in all aspects of our lives so that we can adapt and overcome, so that we don't slide down that dark path towards unhealthy habits, towards unhealthy coping mechanisms, towards addiction, towards depression, towards suicidal ideations, to self-harm. All of those things happen when we do not train ourselves to be more resilient. So while I love to support and go out there and support organizations like the Overwatch Collective that are providing those critical mental health and therapy services to individuals who need it, and there are plenty of people in our community who need it, I also want to provide some of that mindset medicine in advance to give you guys the tools that you need to become more resilient. And one way that I am doing that I'm working on my own physical resilience, my own mental resilience, my own emotional resilience this month, the month of August, is I made a pledge to myself at the start of the month that I was going to run a minimum of 5 miles every single day in the month of August. Now, I'm taking this opportunity to build my base for some fall and winter races that I have planned, but this is forcing me to face some voluntary adversity every single day, to incorporate a physical challenge to force myself to look myself in the mirror to say, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to. I can get through this. And then to execute on that. It's forcing me to keep promises to myself this month. It's forcing me to be accountable to myself. And that is how we build resilience. We do hard things voluntarily so that when involuntary things happen to us, when adversity finds us, we are better prepared mentally, physically, emotionally, socially to deal with it. That is what resilience is. So I would invite you, if you are interested, and I know we're already almost a week into the month, but if you're interested, hop on board with this challenge. It doesn't have to be running 5 miles a day, but I want you to take something that you don't want to do, something that is difficult, something that is a challenge, something that is a stretch for you. And I want you to make a pledge to yourself to do it every single day for the remainder of the month. In fact, if today we're recording this, today is Tuesday, August 2nd. Let's run it for 31 days. Let's run it right up until September 7th, since you missed the first few days of the month. But I want you to come up with something that is a challenge to you and pledge to do it every single day. Something that you don't want to do, whether that is just take a cold shower, 2 minutes with the cold water on before you turn it to warm, whether that is going for a walk, getting 10,000 steps in a day, whether that is logging and tracking your food in MyFitnessPal, keeping a food diary, whether it is keeping a journal every day, doing something that is a challenge to you that is going to help you cultivate some of that resilience across those four domains: physical, emotional, mental, and social. All right, let's jump into the show. As I said, we're starting a new week, we're starting a new month. Glad to have you all here and welcome. We're going to start you off with a quote from Viktor Frankl. For those who don't know who Viktor Frankl is, we're going to dig into it a little bit today. Viktor Frankl says, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. All right, the title of this episode is You Can Always Change Yourself. And I think that is an incredible reminder that we need to keep in mind. We control our own destiny in so many ways. We have the ability to change ourselves. We have the ability to change our mind. We have the ability to change our habits. We have the ability to change our preparation. All of those things are internal. We have that ability. And that is what Viktor Frankl tells us. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist. He was a neurologist. He was also a Holocaust survivor who developed the concept of logotherapy, which emphasizes the search for meaning and purpose in our lives. Now, this is a very Stoic concept. In fact, Viktor Frankl was a student of Epictetus. He was a student of Epictetus's school of Stoicism, as was Marcus Aurelius, as were many others, as was James Stockdale, who we've talked about. But Viktor Frankl is an interesting story because, again, he was a Holocaust survivor. This Austrian Jewish man and his entire family in 1942 were sent off to a ghetto in Czechoslovakia. Not quite a concentration camp, but it was essentially a walled city. It was a place they could not leave, and it was a place where Jews were treated horribly by the Nazis, and the conditions were intentionally set in such a way that individuals who were sent there were likely to die. They were likely to die quickly. It was essentially it was not an economically significant forced labor camp like some were. It was somewhat of a way station en route to extermination camps and en route to some of these forced labor camps. And so people were treated very, very difficult. They had very difficult conditions. They were treated poorly. And in this particular camp that he was first sent to, about 30,000 people died of malnutrition and disease, mostly during the course of the war. So when they say he was sent to a ghetto, first and foremost, I don't want to minimize that. I don't want to make it seem like, oh, he wasn't in a concentration camp. He later was. But from the start, he was in a terrible situation starting in 1942. And over the next 3 years, Frankel endured not only that place, but 4 concentration camps as he was moved from camp to camp. And he also endured in that time the deaths of numerous family members, to include his father, his mother, his brother, and his wife. Now, they died of starvation, they died of disease, they died by being sent to the gas chambers. But imagine losing your father, your mother, your brother, and your new wife, fairly newlywed to his wife. They were split up, they were cast about. He didn't necessarily know that they were all dead at the time, but he knew that they were sent off to extermination camps. They all understood what was happening. And he endured this unimaginable loss, this unimaginable horror at the hands of his tormentors, as so many survivors of the Holocaust did. That is why we say Never again means never again. Never again is now, right? These people endured tremendous horror, tremendous and unimaginable loss at the hands of their Nazi captors and tormentors. But rather than become consumed by despair, resignation to this hopeless situation that was beyond his control, Frankl endeavored to cultivate resilience. Again, that word, we're all about resilience here. He endeavored to cultivate resilience in himself by taking responsibility of his own emotional and mental well being and seeking meaning in every moment of staying alive. Now, he ends up surviving the concentration camps. He survives the ghetto. He survives the concentration camps that he's sent to. He survives the loss of family members. And he emerges after the war and writes a book in 1946 that many of you have probably heard of and many of you have probably read. And if you haven't, I highly, highly, highly recommend you pick up a copy of it. It is called Man's Search for Meaning. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm holding up a copy of it right now. It is one of my most treasured books. It is a fairly easy read, believe it or not, for a book about psychology, for a book about purpose and meaning. But there's been over 16 million copies of this sold since 1946. It is an incredible volume. It's riveted generations of readers with its depictions of his life in these Nazi camps and its lessons for spiritual survival. If you are a individual who is in law enforcement, who is in a difficult job, who is dealing with hard things on a daily basis, I don't want to compare that to life in a concentration camp, to an extermination camp. But I do want to say that anybody who is dealing with the struggle for spiritual survival in these difficult and challenging circumstances that you face on a daily basis, maybe like me, you're a parent of special needs children, you're dealing with difficult things in your family, all of these things weigh heavily on our soul and wear away at our resilience. And that's why this book is so cherished and so incredibly important for people to pick up and read. And again, it's become one of the most influential books in America. It continues to inspire us to find significance in the very act of living. And to kind of come back around to the theme for today, us and developing resilience, what could be more important than developing that strong sense of spiritual survival? So Viktor Frankl writes this book in 1946. Again, it's called Man's Search for Meaning, and it chronicles his survival story. Again, it's sold 16 million copies worldwide, and in it he states that we can discover meaning in three specific and different ways. Number one, we can discover meaning by creating a work or doing a deed. Number two, we can experience something or encounter someone that gives us meaning. And number three, by the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. In other words, we can change how we feel about something. And that is the critical one. Suffering is often unavoidable, but our reaction to it is still within our control and still within our choice. And that is what Frankl focused on during his time in Nazi concentration camps. The suffering was unavoidable, but how he engaged with that suffering is what allowed him to have spiritual survival and physical actual survival, was by not allowing his spirit to suffer and die in the face of unavoidable suffering, but to live in a way where he fortified that inner citadel, withdrew within himself and recognized and understood what he controlled in the situation, and then lived with purpose in mind, lived by creating a work or a deed that he could still, even in these unimaginably horrible places, he could still have a strong sense of purpose and a strong sense of what he was willing to stay alive for, the work, the thing that he intended to do with the gift of life that he had been given. Even though he was dealing with this unavoidable suffering, he still had something to live for. He still had deeds and work that he intended to do. And his attitude towards that suffering was influenced by those first 2 points, the work that he intended to do and the something or someone greater that was waiting on the other side of this suffering. A lot of you can identify with that. And Frankl's story does offer us a powerful reminder that whatever external circumstances we are facing, whether it's on duty or off, we always have control over internal factors such as our attitude, our perspective, our reactions, our ability to find and ascribe meaning to what we do. So I would love for y'all to pick up a copy of Man's Search for Meaning if you haven't read it. read it. Take the time this week to read it. If you're going through something tough in your life, grab this book. It will give you important perspective about spiritual survival and about reframing your perspective in a way that focuses on that which you control and your attitude towards the suffering. Again, it's an incredibly powerful story. I think every cop should read it. I think it should be required actually at the academy so that you can figure out what your purpose is in life, what that greater meaning is, so that you can always keep a focus on that and avoid, to the degree possible, the suffering that is unavoidable. All right, so I'll leave you with an action item, actually a journal prompt today, not action item. Based on what we just talked about, I want you to ask yourself, take out your pen, take out your paper, write this down. How can I change my attitude, my perspective, and my inner reactions to situations outside my control so that I can become more resilient? How can I, in other words, not allow what I am facing to drag me down? In other words, how can I have a strong will and a strong spirit and gain resilience by changing my attitude, changing my perspective, changing my reactions to the situation that I believe is causing me suffering? Suffering is unavoidable, but how we react to that suffering, our perspective and our attitude remains our own. So give yourself that journal prompt, ask yourself those questions today. Thank you so much for listening. I got 3 more episodes for you this week before you go. If you'd like to support this podcast, here's a few ways you can do so. Number 1, please pick up a copy of my book, In Valor 365 Stoic Meditations for First Responders. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you get your books. It's available on Kindle and Nook for instant download right now, or you can order the paperback edition on Amazon Prime. You can have it in a couple of days. It's a great resource for law enforcement and first responders, and really anyone who wants to practice this philosophy daily. It's going to give you quotes, contextualization that's directly relatable to your job, daily journal prompts, and action items to help you integrate those lessons. Folks, if you're watching on YouTube, I am holding up a copy of it. This is what it looks like. In Valor 365 Stoic Meditations for First Responders. Number 2, you can subscribe to my free Substack called The Stoic Responder. On that page, you can get podcasts delivered to your email. You can also get my weekly newsletters with Stoic leadership and personal development tips. And finally, the easiest thing that you can do is please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast so that others can learn about what we are doing here and benefit from these lessons. Thanks so much for listening, folks. Until next time, you are out of roll.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, like, rate, and share this podcast so that we can spread the benefits of Stoicism to other first responders. It will only take you a few moments, but it can help us tremendously. Until next time, out of roll.